degree of anxiety and depression that is present is significant.
Tonight, a warning: Oscar Pistorius is severely traumatised and at risk of committing suicide after killing girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp. But psychiatric reports find he wasn't mentally ill when he shot dead the model last year. Welcome to the High Court in Pretoria, where Oscar Pistorius' defence has almost concluded. Today, the court heard extracts from 2 reports into the athlete's mental well-being. One found he is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and will become an increasing suicide risk unless he continues to get treatment. And as the trial draws to a close, we hear from the final witness who describes Pistorius' fear of fireworks. Ian Woods reports.
Day 36 of a trial which began 4 months ago. The biggest delay in Oscar Pistorius' trial has been the month-long adjournment while he underwent psychological examination. Today, both defence and prosecution lawyers quoted different extracts from the psychologist's report, which they believe best supports their case. First, the defence barrister, Barry Roux.
Thank you, my lady. Mr. Pistorius has been severely traumatised by the events that took place on the 14th of February 2014. He currently suffers from a post-traumatic stress disorder and a major depressive disorder as defined by Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 in brackets DSM-5, see Annexure C. The degree of anxiety and depression that is present is significant. He is also mourning the loss of Ms. Steenkamp. 5.2. Mr. Pistorius is being treated and should continue to receive clinical care by a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist for his current condition. Should he not receive proper clinical care, his condition is likely to worsen and increase the risk for suicide, and then a reference to references. 5.3. No evidence could be found to indicate that Mr. Pistorius has the history of abnormal aggression or explosive violence. Abnormal aggression and violence was never incorporated into his personality, as borne out by both psychometric testing and collateral information. He does not display the personality characteristics of narcissism and/or psychopathy that are mostly associated with men in abusive relationships and have been linked to rage-type murders in intimate relationships. Those who know him describe him as gentle, respectful, and conflict avoidant. The times when he did become angry were found to be suitable for the situation and context. His style of conflict resolution is to talk through the situation or remove himself from the situation. He also has the ability to self-reflect afterwards, mostly leading to feelings of guilt and an apology from him. His ability to regulate his affect is well developed. 5.4. There is evidence to indicate that Mr. Pistorius does have a history of feeling insecure and vulnerable, especially when he's without his prosthesis. He has also been exposed to crime directly and indirectly throughout his life. A reaction to a threatening situation comprises more than flight or fight. An appraisal takes place instantly, whereby the individual assesses firstly the intensity of the threat and then his position to cope with the threat. These appraisals are influenced by, amongst other things, previous experience. When Mr. Pistorius' appraisal of a situation is that he might be physically threatened, a fear response follows, which might seem extraordinary when viewed from the perspective of an able-bodied person, but normal in the context of a disabled person with his history. 5.5. No evidence could be found to indicate that Mr. Pistorius suffered from anxiety to the extent that it impaired his functioning prior to the incident in February 2014. He specifically does not meet criteria D for the DSM-5 for generalized anxiety disorder. Quote, the anxiety, worry, or physical symptoms cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. That's also referred to in Annexure C. If his context is taken into account, his function was superior prior to the incident in February 2014. For somebody of his age, his achievements in both his occupation and the social sphere were enormous. The successful intimate relationship he craved and his inability to rehabilitate his relationship with his father being the only areas where he achieved less success. 5.6. There is evidence to indicate that Mr. Pistorius was genuine with his feelings towards Ms. Steenkamp. and that they had a normal, loving relationship. He did become insecure and jealous at times, but this was normal for the specific situation. He would express his displeasure and irritation, but would try and sort it out later by talking with Ms. Steenkamp. Although the relationship was still young, there were no signs of abuse or coercion like those often found in these kinds of relationships, and then reference to previous works by experts. In his previous long-term relationship of 4 years, these aspects were also absent. And then the findings which were previously read into the record just as to his mental state. So the submission that we make, of course, there is no dispute about the mental state that is, with specific reference to section 78, that's on record. And then as regards to the report is before the court to be considered by the court, of course, in the context of all the evidence before the court. And there would be no cross-examination on behalf of the defense.
Thank you
much.
Prosecutor Harry Nell didn't challenge any of that, but focused on other conclusions within the report.
The examination consisted of clinical interviews with the accused and observation of his general behavior. He was physically examined, special investigations, including blood tests, and that's a difficult that's very difficult. May I get some guidance from behind me how I should pronounce that word? Electroencephalogram, my lady. I don't apologize for not being able to do that.
Yes, can you repeat that, please?
Do you want me to repeat it, my lady?
Yes, please.
Electroencephalogram.
Thank you.
Please don't ask me to do it again.
Thank you.
Currently, the accused presents with an adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood that developed after the alleged incident. This has no bearing on paragraph C. Paragraph C reads, at the time of the alleged offences, the accused did not suffer from a mental disorder or a mental defect that affected his ability to distinguish between the rightful and wrongful nature of his deeds. A mental disorder or mental defect did not affect his ability to act in accordance with the said appreciation of the rightful or wrongful nature of his deeds.
The athlete's mental state was also discussed by a doctor who has worked with Mr. Pistorius, as well as other elite South African sportsmen and women. Professor Wayne Derman chose not to give his evidence on camera, but told defence lawyer Kenny Oldwidge that the Blade Runner often worried about his health.
I was contacted over Skype by Mr. Pistorius when he was in Belgium and I was in Glasgow. When a very distressed Mr. Pistorius showed me over the Skype camera his clearly bleeding stumps, which were deprived of skin. At that time, he was attempting to qualify for the London Olympics. I arranged for him to see a physician in London and also instructed the team doctor to take special dressings and medications to Benin, which was the next destination at which he would compete. With respect to paragraph 22, my observations relating to aspects of Mr. Pistorius's interactions with myself is that he is an anxious individual. I have found him to be anxious during most interactions with myself and others within the Paralympic Village and other environments particularly related to competition. He has a tremor of the hands. He also presents with a sleep disorder, a disorder for which I have previously had to medicate him.
There have been several references during the trial to Oscar Pistorius' love of guns, someone who enjoyed firing weapons. Professor Derman, though, highlighted a very different response to loud bangs.
He presents with a very exaggerated startle response, which I have observed a number of times at opening or closing ceremonies when the events were marked by fireworks. Whilst I have seen this exaggerated response in a number of the Paralympic athletes, Mr. Pistorius exhibits an excessive response which involves him covering his head and ears and cowering away until the noise ends.
The doctor said he spoke with Pistorius twice in the days leading up to when Reeva Steenkamp was shot dead inside the athlete's house.
The last communication I had with Mr. Pistorius prior to the incident on the 14th of February 2013 was a call I received from him on the 2nd of February 2013 when he phoned me as he was suffering from an upper respiratory tract infection and sinusitis. After asking him a number of questions related to his symptomatology, I advised him to go to the pharmacy so that I could send through a telephonic prescription. I then asked him how life had settled down after London, to which he responded that he was at that moment lying next to the most wonderful girl that he had met. He also told me that he could not wait for me to meet her and that she was going to now take him to the pharmacy to collect the medication on prescription from myself. Thereafter, and on the 10th of February 2013, I followed up with him as to his medical condition and his fitness to return to training.
Coming up, the court hears how Reeva Steenkamp may not have been as special to Oscar Pistorius as previously suggested. Welcome back. For a second day, Oscar Pistorius' manager, Piet van Zyl, has been cross-examined. Yesterday, he said Reeva Steenkamp was the first of the athlete's girlfriends who'd been invited to join him on overseas trips, an indication of the strength of the relationship. But prosecutor Harry Nell suggested there had been others before her.
Did you go overseas with Samantha Taylor?
I never went overseas with Ms.
Did you
Taylor.
ever have to arrange a visa for her?
I cannot recall that I had to arrange a visa for Ms. Taylor.
If I put to you that you received an email from the accused sending you a copy of Samantha Taylor's passport, and that happened on the 12th of September 2012. Would that be strange?
I can honestly not recall that email that I received.
Arrow, where I would want you to look.
I must admit I cannot recall receiving this email, but I obviously did receive this email.
Now let us just read out what the accused, or in terms of what we have in front of us, what the message was.
Here is Sam's passport. Please keep it on file. Think we're sorting shit out. Oz.
Now let's deal with sorting shit out. What is that?
If I have to read this as it is here and interpret it, I would assume it would be a love quarrel or difference of opinion that they might have had.
But then, if he writes you something like that, he must think you know what's going on. Otherwise, why would he say that?
I must admit I did not interfere in any of Mr. Pistorius or any of my other clients' personal lives, and I did not ask what he specifically referred to here in this case.
The accused wrote a letter to Samantha Taylor wherein he said, I invited you to London because I knew that without me knowing you have had my heart in your hands for months and never once let it go. He said he invited her to London. Why would you not know that?
Because I was never informed of that as far as I can recall.
Did you not phone Samantha's mother to try and get them to London? Because that's also what I have. Think about it, please, Mr. van Zyl.
I can honestly state that I cannot recall having to arrange for Ms. Taylor to go to the London Olympic Games.
You see, because the point you made is he's the first girl ever he's invited, and now I sit with a letter written by him, which shows the contrary.
Mr. Nell then quoted from a subsequent email from Oscar Pistorius to Samantha Taylor.
This is so hard to write because I don't deserve you, Sam. When I invited you, I was so excited to tell you because I knew we had some hard days behind us. I asked Piet to do everything he could last week to find you a ticket. So that's not true. That must be you.
It's me, but I can honestly not recall that I had to find or source or secure a ticket.
But let's unpack that. If he asked you to arrange a ticket for Samantha Taylor, you would have remembered. This must then be a lie that he wrote.
I cannot say if it's a lie that he wrote, because as I said, I cannot recall having to source or secure a ticket for Miss Taylor to the Olympics.
Next, Mr. Nell raised examples of Mr. Pistorius losing his temper while preparing for athletic competitions, quoting an article by a journalist.
Still, I was aware this poster boy for the Paralympic Games could have flashes of a darker side. I'd experienced his anger shortly before the Beijing Paralympic Games. Oscar was at the pre-games training camp and phoned Mr. O'Sullivan, raging about what he perceived to be inadequate training kit. His fury at the South African management caught me by surprise. Oscar knew he couldn't be ignored, and his anger would ensure his demands were met. I hadn't expected Oscar to be a prima donna. Do you know anything about the accused unhappiness about this?
I was aware of the training kit being insufficient that was supplied to the Paralympic team at that stage.
And he was upset about it.
And that Mr. Pistorius was upset about it.
A fellow Paralympian and roommate called Arnoud Fourie had been quoted the day before as saying he had to move to another room because of Pistorius' behaviour.
He told me he had been forced to move out because Oscar was constantly screaming in anger at people on the phone. I thought Fourie was joking and waited for a smile, but he was serious. So, you never heard that he was constantly screaming in anger at people on the phone?
I never heard that. As per my answer yesterday, I received a phone call from Coach Ampilo informing me that there was an issue with one of the athletes, and that team management will take care of this and they will sort it out.
Within a few hours, Arnoud Fourie had responded on Twitter and it was read out in court.
Just to clarify, I approached our medical doctor at the London 2012 Paralympic Games to find out if the isolation room was available 2 nights before our 100-meter final. It was one of the most important races of my life and I wanted to rest and recover well on my own time in preparation for the race. I cherish all the moments we shared at the London Games. Arnoud Fourie.
Nowhere in Mr. Arnoud Fourie's tweet of last night did he deny the fact that Oscar was on the phone screaming at people. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we're almost at the end of what has been a lengthy trial, delayed while those fascinating psychiatric assessments were carried out. Well, with me to discuss the impact of these and what happens next, I have attorney Martin Hood and acting judge Llewellyn Carr-Lewis. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Now, first of all, Martin, now we know that Oscar Pistorius is in such a precarious mental state. What does it mean for the trial right now?
Well, I think first of all, it may be a defence tactic to get us talking more about Pistorius' mental state than the actual crime. So we're not focusing so much on the crime. What we must remember, though, is that this all happened subsequent to the commission of the crime itself. And therefore, for the purposes of determining whether Pistorius is guilty or not, it's not relevant. The only relevance of this, from what I can assess the situation, is that they're going to argue, the defense is going to argue that his bad evidence was in some way influenced by his precarious state of mind.
But we did hear some of the conclusions of this psychologist report about the time of the offence, saying that he wasn't aggressive, that there was no evidence of anger. How does that help the defence or harm the prosecution?
Maybe we should go back to basics and look at the objective facts before court. Remember, from the outset, the purpose of this assessment was to determine whether he can be held criminally responsible for his act at the time of the incident. And that was the only purpose of the section 77, 78 and 79 application that was brought by Gerrie Nel. And to that effect, the state succeeded to show to the court he can be held criminally responsible for his acts on the day of the shooting. All other aspects are collateral to that issue at hand. And correctly pointed out by Martin, I think we should distinguish the facts before court, the objective facts, and side issues.
And yet the prosecution has made much in its case of Oscar Pistorius being short-tempered, being an aggressive person, and the psychologist seems to suggest otherwise.
Well, I think, first of all, Gerrie Nel had to do that, to present a case to stop a discharge before Pistorius gave evidence, and he wanted to ensure that Pistorius had to give evidence. All of this evidence over the last couple of days has not been directly related to the crime. It's not related to the objective facts. It's related to countering what evidence the state has led. So in terms of relevance, this is just tying up a few loose ends at the end of the trial.
We're very nearly at the end in terms of the evidence. Defence last witness on the stand at the moment. What happens next?
What happens next is obviously now both parties must have the opportunity to produce heads of argument, whether orally or in writing, preferably in writing. That will take up some time, I suppose. And after that, then the court will adjourn to consider the verdict, and judgment will follow then soon thereafter.
I think what's also important to bear in mind from the UK viewers' point of view is that we don't have a jury system in this country. It will be done in writing. We will probably get copies of those heads of argument, and the judge will be given them, the assessors will be given them. They will go away, consider the pros and cons. It will be quite a technical document, and the judge will be asked to consider it, and after that she'll come back and give a judgment. And then I think there's also going to be the possible sentencing phase if he's found guilty, which will be another process afterwards.
So even with the end of the evidence, we're still some weeks away from a verdict. So thank you very much, both of you. And a reminder that as the defence case draws to a close, we'll have a special programme every night and a catch-up programme this weekend. For now, though, goodbye from Pretoria.